Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 36 Cancel, and this is Coco the Weiss Cat. And today we're living in sin and checking out the 7 big no-nos. 7 Deadly Sins is dropped in English quite recently, and being that it's an English original, we don't have too much information on how to brew it yet. That said, there do seem to be some builds that have been pretty established, centered around the big players in the set. So today I want to talk about what's kind of leading the pack of marbles as they roll down the tubes, as well as touch a little bit on the set itself. Now, I want to preface this by saying I have absolutely no idea about the source material for 7 Deadly Sins. Usually, I do a bit more of a deep dive into the source material, but there's just a lot of stuff on my list right now, and I'd like to get this done. However, based on my very limited knowledge of the show, the cards do seem to have some very in-flavor effects. First, the set is 4 colors and has character pairings that are themed to those colors, with the enemy faction, the Holy Knights, being relegated to blue. In yellow, Meliodas carries a lot of abilities that punish your opponent for hurting you and also can protect his friends, and he pairs with Elizabeth, also in yellow, who has abilities that support both the player and Meliodas himself. In red, Ban and Elaine pair together and even share a climax combo, with Elaine giving you a lot of deck access and Ban laying the hurt on your opponent. In green, you have Diane and King, who carry technical abilities, and then there's Merlin in red with stuff that gets you out of a sticky situation, and Hawk in yellow, who assists the 7 Deadly Sins in the ways that he can. Like we said, blue has its own package based around the Holy Knights, and it's clearly meant to be played on its own, though it's very possible to mix in tools from the main body of the set to make it better, because if you don't, while the blue finisher is pretty good, the rest of the deck is very lackluster and can be constructed for under $20 right now. You can also make a primarily red standby deck, splashing any other colors you want, but that package is also pretty subpar. So what we'll talk about mainly in this video is the actual Sins deck, which is mainly yellow and green with the option to splash red, which many people are. And while there is some variation in builds, many of the key players stay the same, so what we'll do is start at the 0 and then go up the chain covering the staples and the tech-ins as we go. So without further ado, let's get into it. A great place to start is Important Things Meliodas. At 2k, he gets +1 level and +1500 on play if you have another character, and he's a clean cut, meaning that when he reverses a battle opponent, you can choose another one of your characters, rest it, and then move it to an open position of your backstage. This is a great profile for a clean cut, and it's a pretty solid start to any deck as a 3 or 4 of. Next up, and a card that pairs wonderfully with Meliodas, is Gilthunder Magic Words. At base 1500, he gets +2k if he has a marker, and when you play him, you reveal a top card of your deck, and if it's a character, you put it under him as a marker. And finally, he's a chaser, meaning that at the start of your opponent's attack phase, you can move him to an open position of your center stage with a character facing him. Now, as far as chasers go, the fact that he can miss the marker and stay small, and the fact that he has nothing that prevents your opponent from siding against him anyway, means he's not better than a lot of others from different sets. However, the fact that he's mobile and gets big most of the time makes him a solid choice as a 3 or 4 of in most decks. Now for some other staples, we move into red. Ban for a special someone makes an appearance as a 3 of in many decks. On play, you can look at the top card of your deck and keep it there or put it in the waiting room. And when he's reversed in battle, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 character from among them, put it into your hand, and then pitch a card. At 2k, he's a solid filter option that helps you find what you need. Another popular staple in red is Guarding the Spring Elaine. At 1500, when she comes in, she has 2 abilities. First, you reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a character, you add it to your hand and then pitch a card. And second, you can pitch a character to draw a card. This is the same powerful profile as cards like An Ordinary Piece Cowgirl and Confrontation with Humans Toka. And while it's an amazing card in a vacuum, because of how the set is designed, it often doesn't have the same impact as those other cards do in their respective sets. However, that by no means implies that it isn't a popular and solid choice, usually as a 2 or 3 of in most decks that include it. Now the set has a few brainstormers, however the clear choice for the Sins deck is Merlin Surprise Introduction. She's a tap self salvage brainstormer that gives your center middle character +500. There's not much to say about this profile except it's solid, not amazingly broken, but not bad by any means. So that wraps up the more popular staples for 0 when it comes to deck construction. Some cards that you don't see in every deck, as well as some tech 1 or 2 ofs, include a Hawk that mills 2 on play and gives +1500 power to a character if he sees a climax, that's also a salvage Ricky, a drop-searching Elizabeth that gets +1 soul, she's in the center middle, a pay 1 climax switching King, and an Elizabeth that you can pay 1 and send her to the waiting room to top check 4 for a character. Now these are a lot of staples and tech-ins, and it's worth mentioning that the decks we're seeing so far play a heavier 0 game than we usually see, hovering around 17 to 20 instead of a more conservative 16, 15, and even 14 that we've seen in some of the top decks. And that in mind, the level 1 is usually pretty light, though in any deck the obvious 4 of is your level 1 combo, and in the 7 Deadly Sins deck there are 2 popular choices. First, there's Druid Priestess Elizabeth. At base 4500, she gets +1500 during your turn if you have another character. Her combo is on a choice, and on attack you mill 2 and salvage an X or lower character, where X is the combined levels of the cards you milled. This is the same effect as Conqueror of Flame Shizu, though she doesn't go to memory or anything special like that. It's okay on attack advantage, but it's not like she gets huge or has any special tricks. The second choice people gravitate towards is Elaine facing a demon. At 4500, she gets plus 1k if you have 2 or more other characters, and with her combo, on a gate, you top check 4 and add a character. This is very comparable to the baseline trial deck combos and single rares from other sets, and again, it's on attack advantage, but nothing super busted. And that summarizes both of these choices at level 1. Honestly, neither of them are much to write home about, but they're not awful. Now, while Elizabeth does get bigger on your turn than Elaine, and lets you play an 8-choice build, which is pretty neat, Elaine gets a little bigger across turns, and also shares her combo with a level 3 ban that many choose to pack as a secondary finisher. So whether you play one or the other depends on how you feel about color management and what kind of options you want at level 3, and we'll get there soon enough. But before I do, I want to take a look at Breaking the Spell Elizabeth. She's a 1/1 4k and has 2 effects. First, at the start of your opponent's attack phase, you can pay 1 and switch her with another one of your characters, and second, she's an anti-early play stock swapper. This is an extremely similar profile to the Yoshino from Day Day Live that bottom decks early plays and also switches, and it's a powerful set of abilities for sure, especially on a 1/1. Most decks pack it as at least a 1 of, though I've seen higher. The only other hard staple in these decks seems to be this 1/1 Merlin backup that lets you look at the top card of your deck when you use it and add it to your hand and then pitch a card if it's a character. Most 1/1 backups that carry this effect are 1500, but this one is actually 2k, making it a cut above the rest in some ways. Now, while there are other level 1 options that some people like to run, the rest of the level 1 and 7 Deadly Sins isn't terribly amazing, and it's not what gives the deck its structure, so you can choose any of the other tech options, but I won't visit on any more of them. Instead, we'll move on to the level 2. Now, one big staple in most SDS decks is Elizabeth sacrificing herself. In addition to giving all level 3 cards in front of her plus 2k, she gives all of your To the Rescue Meliodas plus 1k and prevents them from being chosen by your opponent's effects, and also gives them the ability that during their battles, you cannot take damage from your opponent's auto effects. If you hadn't guessed, To the Rescue Meliodas is our primary level 3 finisher, so this is an extremely desirable card for us to have. We also pack very decent early plays, so the level 3 assist ability is value outside of that. Most decks run her as at least a 2 of. The other staple that we normally see at level 2 is another Elizabeth, but this time she's a 2/1 2500, pay 2 free fresh backup, and that's hard to argue with, at least as a 1 of, maybe a 2 of. Now again, there are some other tech choices at level 2, like a 2/1 anti-change in blue that carries a heavy cost, and a Hawk that makes your opponent refresh without 1 climax that also costs a lot to use, but the 2 we talked about before are the primary choices. So since we've gone over those, it's time to move into the level 3. Starting with a strong early play, we have Diane, Cheerful. At base 9k, she gets -1 level in your hand if you have 4 or more other characters. She gets a further plus 2k during your turn, and when she comes in, you can pitch a card and heal the top card of your clock into your stock. If you hadn't noticed, this is the same profile as the Aqua from Konosuba Set 2, and again, this is a profile that we know is super strong. It's everything we want from an early play, and most decks run her as a 3 or 4 of. Now, let's move on to the crux of the deck. To the Rescue Meliodas. At base 9k, he gets plus 2k if you're playing a legal deck, and he's an on-play healer. He has a climax combo with a choice that works as follows. When the climax is placed in your zone, and you have 4 or more other characters, he gets plus 1k and the following ability until the end of your opponent's next turn. When the character facing this card attacks, you can pay 1 and deal 2 damage to your opponent. So let's take this package as a whole. Consider the level 2 Elizabeth that stops your opponent from dealing damage to you using auto effects, stops Meliodas from being chosen by their other effects, and further boosts his power by a ton. With 1 Elizabeth behind him and an active combo, Meliodas is 15k on your opponent's turn and 16k with 2 Elizabeths on the field, and a further 18k if he's in the center middle in that scenario. This is probably one of the most brutal defensive combos in English Weiss that doubles as a finishing combo. Turning off your opponent's auto effects full stop is pretty amazing, as is the low cost for the burn 2 that Meliodas can deal, regardless of how the character facing him attacks, and before the actual attack takes place. I would argue that this is the main draw to playing 7 Deadly Sins, as this presents a very difficult board to crack and a truly 90-degree uphill battle to finish the game to your opponent. Of course, it's not bulletproof. Your opponent can always find a way to get rid of the Elizabeth, meaning that you lose the auto ability protection and a lot of power. But still, this is an extremely cool combo, and I can't wait to try it for myself. However, most SDS decks elect to run a different combo in tandem with Meliodas, and that's Ban facing a demon. At base 10k, he's an on-play, draw 2, pitch 1, and he has his own climax combo. Now we can pull this off because it's actually the same gate climax, Fountain of Youth, as the level 1 Elaine combo if you chose to run her. Obviously, if you go with the 8-choice route, there's not much reason to run this ban. His combo is that when you reverse your battle opponent and you have 4 or more other characters, you can pay 2, burn 3, and then put that character on top of your opponent's deck. Now, it would be nice if he deck kicked before the burn or had any sort of power buff on his own, but he's still a very decent secondary finisher. The nice part about running him is that you have the chance to finish your opponent on your turn without relying on the Meliodas combo, especially if you know that your opponent has a way to disrupt it, and the Elizabeth back rows still give him a decent boost, and at worst, the draw 2 pitch 1 helps you dig. So these are the primary 2 finishing tools, and we've covered the early play. The only thing left to wrap up the deck is to visit the tech options at level 3. Diane, Wielder of Gideon, is often run as a 1-of because of her pay 1 stock swap ability on play. Disguise options Elizabeth may also be thrown in because of her early play condition and top check X on play, where X is characters. And finally, Negative Little Girl Gilthunder can be thrown in for her ability to bounce a character on play. These are all fine options, and what you choose to run along with your main finishing package is going to depend on how you feel about the meta and just personal preference, though if any, I'd recommend the stock swapping Diane the most. And that about wraps it up. What we've outlined today are the major options for the 7 Deadly Sins build that centers around that level 3 Meliodas combo. Whether you decide to run the 8-choice build or the 4-gate and 4-choice variant, the Meliodas is still your key player, and a big reason to pick up the deck. It's definitely a different style of deck, and it offers compelling reasons to pick up this English original title. And you know what? At the time of making this video, the deck is super cheap to pick up. I built mine for less than $100, so if you're on the fence or have any love for the 7 Deadly Sins, I'd pick it up for yourself and give it a shot. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.